Now right off the bat, I'm sure you're asking yourself, why is he using this shot with the camera shooting directly into the sun? Well, I can tell you that will be answered in a little bit. But until then, let's watch as the Sky Surfer starts up his 6 cameras and gets ready for a flight to Severy, Kansas. This one will be called Sun Over Severy for good reason.
All right, we're rolling. 8 o'clock in the morning. Near Hayesville, Selby Aerodrome. Fired up. Heading to Severy, Kansas. All right. 60 miles east. Clear.
Okay, for those of you not familiar with the Sky Surfer's arcane customs, he wasn't showing you the victory sign or even the peace sign. Twice he had to make sure that you saw that he was able to start this motor with just 2 pulls. Now, if you don't think that's worthy of note, you might understand that back in the 80s, the old Cuyuna motors and some of those others that we used to use to fly these things might not start in 10 pulls. They might not start at all, and you wouldn't be flying that day. So 2 pulls is pretty good. The Sky Surfer is particularly impressed with himself when he starts it on the first pull. Okay, at the movie open, I told you I was going to explain why I was shooting the camera into the sun or using that sun shot. Well, I guess now's the time. During this flight, we're going to be able to look this way, and sometimes this way over here, or even this way. But a lot of times we're going to be looking this way. Severy, Kansas is pretty much due east of Blue Sky Stables and Aerodrome, where we just took off from. So that means at this time of the year, you're flying directly into the sun all the way there. But just like at night when you're driving down the highway, you don't look into the headlights, the same thing goes on a day like this. I found that if I just keep my eyes from looking directly in the area of the sun, I can see pretty well. Occasionally I'll fly with my hand shading my eyes, but other than that, it's pretty doable. This day, particularly for the cameras, not so much for my eyes, the meteorological situation created quite a challenge. You see, these modern cameras have firmware in them that allows it to distinguish between bright and normal visible areas of the scene, so they can attenuate the glow or the brightness around a pin light or spotlight, which would be represented by the sun today, but that's not what we're experiencing right now. For a great deal of the flight, the sun was actually shining through a high-level cloud layer that was quite a distance away, but it had the effect of diffusing the light over a large area of the sky. So in this instance, what we have is an unusual circumstance for these cameras. They can deal with the sun looking straight into it, but this is kind of like the sun times 20. All that being said, I'm completely amazed at the quality and capabilities of these cameras. They're all digital now, but I can remember back when I first got into the video business back in the early 80s, I was working at a TV station in the news department, and they had just made the transition from 16mm film over to video cameras. Back then, you would never point a camera into the sun like you're seeing in this shot because it would permanently damage the tubes. They used to have 3 tubes in these little cameras, and if you just even swung the camera past the sun like this and the iris was open too far, you'd just burn the thing and the company would be out thousands of dollars. Now, when the camera's not pointing directly into the sun, you can see it's quite a beautiful day. We have a blue sky with cumulus and cirrus clouds above. You can tell that it's nice and warm because the sky surfer's only wearing shorts and a short sleeve shirt. It's about 75 degrees, and it's going to get a lot hotter this day. Past the cockpit area there, you see Southeast Boulevard, which heads out of Wichita through Mulvane in the distance. You might also notice that we just passed over the Nenasko River. I've been staying at about 600 to 800 AGL, above ground level that is, altitude, because we're passing over a highway and there's houses down below, and it's not very populated here, but still there's people live here, and you don't want to disturb them on a Saturday morning. Typically when I go on a sky safari, I like to fly at about 100 feet or less, and since the main thrust of this safari is to show you the world-renowned Flint Hills of Kansas, I'm going to compress time here a little bit and take us over to Highway 77. I'm going to cross over just to the north of Douglas, Kansas, and we'll get down on the deck and start taking a look around. Well, did you like that? We just covered 12.3 miles, a little faster than I usually do. And as predicted, we're about to cross over Highway 77. In the distance, off the right wing, you can see Douglas, Kansas. That's the home of Lawrence Alley and his airport there. Lawrence is very personable and a gracious host. He built his runway right next to his house on a hill, which is pretty interesting in itself, but if you add to that it has a drop-off on one end and a cemetery on the other end, it is even more unique. I always have an interesting time when I drop in there. It's one of the top spots for fun flyers in the area. Because of the nature of the landscape out here in Kansas, most Kansas fields are big rectangles, but sometimes you have odd shapes like the one we see below us, and I found this very interesting, the way he tailored the hayfield, and they've raked the hay up after it's been dried, getting ready to bale it, and it looks like a hay maze. I moved us ahead about 5 minutes, so now we're in the Flint Hills at cruising altitude, and as you can see, we're passing a farm over there under my left wing near that pond. I do my best to stay on the GPS track first to save fuel and actually so you don't get lost. But if you see a farmhouse right in front of you or a herd of cattle or things of that nature, you know, you got to circumvent them. So just doing the right thing. There's another house off the starboard wing, but I think you can see things are really starting to clear out now. I'm going to move ahead a little bit, and we're going to drop down on the deck and see what it looks like. No sooner do I get down on the deck and start skimming the prairie when somebody puts some wires in the way. Well, I just have to go up and over them. Down on the floor again, we're out here in the great wide open, the Flint Hills of Kansas. Well, that was an interesting little interlude. You know, if you do stuff like that, though, you really have to pay attention to your airspeed and your wingtips, because if you drag a wingtip down that low, you're going to end up with that deer chasing you. You know, I feel quite blessed, fortunate indeed, to be living out here in Kansas and be able to fly on the Great Plains down through Oklahoma also. It's just a wonderful atmosphere. Back in the old days, they used to call this the Great American Desert, but it's nothing of the sort. It's quite beautiful, and the terrain is wonderful to look at. You're going to see some more relief coming up here shortly. While there are lots of nice flat areas like we're seeing right here, there are also plateaus and rolling hills. But it's just a beautiful place. I can land a plane pretty much anywhere. If I did have an engine failure, I can put it down. The problem's going to be finding somebody, to give me a ride or help me fix the problem, whatever it might be. I really, really like flying out in the Great Plains a lot. Now, I'd like to put in a plug for Quicksilver Aviation, because without them and their engineering, I wouldn't be able to do this. It's a strong plane, and I trust it. And I'm almost up to 1,000 hours in type here. I got my private license in the Cessna and flew Cessna 150s and 172s, but primarily all my flying time has been in Quicksilvers and in Ultralights. While it's not for everybody, it certainly is for me, and what I mean by that is low and slow. These airplanes are very docile. You know when it's going to stall. When they stall, they go straight over. It's a good plane. It's strong. I've been in turbulence that would rattle your teeth, and never had any problems with airframe. For me, one of the keys that I would pass on to you if you want to fly like this is maintenance. You really need to keep on top of the plane, make sure that it's in tip-top condition before you go out flying places. If you don't think you're competent to work on certain parts of it, like for instance, I don't have any problem working on airframe, but my engine I ship out to Rotax Rick, and he has done just a fantastic job keeping my Rotax 503 running like a top. So there's always people around that you can get to do stuff for you. You got to pay them some money, but this is a sport, and you should treat it with respect, and it'll reward you enormously. Now, everybody knows that a group of pigeons is called a flock of pigeons, but it's a good thing that I checked out. A flock of geese is actually called a gaggle of geese. So after that, before chiseling this into my video, I decided to do some research, and sure enough, come to find out that a group of turkeys is actually called a rafter of turkeys. You probably guess why I brought this up. This happened suddenly as I cut through the gap in the tree row you see ahead. Here's our rafter of turkeys again from different camera angles as they appeared, each in turn so that you can see them as well as possible. I've seen wild turkeys in Kansas many times, but never this close, and never have I seen them take to the air like you see here. I really surprised them. You know, it didn't surprise me when I saw it, but I just wasn't expecting that my path to Severy would take me right through the windmill farm that is directly south of Beaumont, Kansas. I know we still have the sun in our eyes here, but you can see down low there on the horizon the windmills. There's 100 of them, and the FAA has decided that we shouldn't be allowed to fly too close to these. Even the 500-foot limit is too close, apparently. So I have to go around this field, but you'll be able to see a little bit of them as I go past this on the way to Severy. Since the detour around the windmills wasn't all that interesting, and what's on the other side is much more interesting, I've decided to shorten this a little bit. You know, these windmills are magnificent achievements of engineering, and they're really neat to look at. But on the other hand, I'm not thrilled with the way the powers that be have blanketed large areas of Kansas with these things. I'm not convinced that they're viable. By that I mean, I'm concerned that when the tax subsidies drop on these things, the owners of them are going to walk away from them, and we're going to see a bunch of broken fiberglass hanging from big steel poles littering the prairie with nobody to take them down. I don't like to be negative, but I've seen what happened back in the 70s. As soon as they dropped the subsidies on the smaller wind generators they had back then, they all went away. So we'll see what happens. No sooner do we pass the windmill south of Beaumont, Kansas, then the beauty of the Flint Hills takes on a whole new phase. Now, earlier in the piece, I spoke of getting some relief. What I was really meaning was like you would see on a relief map. Here you see one of the most beautiful areas I've ever seen, and this is the rolling hills of Kansas. This is where you see the bluffs, the plateaus. This is what I remember from the movies of the Old West that I saw when I was young. You can see in the video that I was taking a lot of still pictures at this point, so I'm going to show some of them to you right now. 4.1 miles east of the Benton Wind Farm is Lake Climber. Now, originally my path would have taken me just to the north of Lake Climber, but since I circumnavigated the wind farm to the south, I'm still making my way back to the path that was previously set by GPS, and so now the question is whether to cross over or go around it to the north. Flying ultralights is a little bit different from flying certificated aircraft in that we're using two-stroke motors. They're a lot more dependable than they were back in the 80s, but it's always wise to be able to land. The closer I got to this part of the lake, I could see I wasn't going to be over water very long at all. The engine had been running good. I didn't want to climb and burn more fuel because I still didn't have my destination in sight, so I just went for it and worked out pretty good. As you can see earlier, and particularly in this shot here, I was getting a lot of roll action. What that is from the turbulence. As the day was progressing, it'll pick up naturally, and it was getting windier. And I don't mind that. I just like the plane to do pretty much what it wants to do as long as it's going in the general direction that I want to travel. But to get a little bit less of that going on, I decided to get closer to the surface. hope you like this as much as I do, because I'm going to roll another song and we're going to take in more of the grandeur of the Kansas Flint Hills. As you can see, over the last minute or so, I've made a gentle climb to about 200 feet. While I don't keep stopwatch accuracy, I get a general idea of how long I've been in the air and on these trips, and I decided I should be seeing Severy here pretty soon, so the only way to do that is to get up a little higher, and that's what I'm doing right now. You know, while we're scanning the horizon for Severy here, I'd like to talk a little bit about something I find very interesting regarding people's perception of flying. I'm addressing this mostly to, or entirely to, non-pilots, people that maybe have flown on an airliner but really don't have much understanding of aircraft or flying or aviation. When I mention to those type of folks that I fly, and particularly when I fly this kind of airplane, which I'm out in the open and not surrounded by any kind of a cockpit or anything, they invariably say that must be real thrilling, or that must be a real rush, they say, or scary, or boy, I bet that's intense. Now, I'll admit on occasion you can make a poor decision and get caught out in bad weather, and that can be a little stress producing, but flying like I am right now, a few hundred feet above the surface, Once I get the plane trimmed out, it basically flies itself. It's very relaxing. You can just look around. You have the wind blowing in your face, the sun. It's a very relaxing thing. There's nothing hairy about it at all. Even when I get down close to the surface, 3, 4, 5 feet above the ground, like you've seen me do earlier in this movie, I guarantee you my heartbeat isn't going any faster than it does sitting on the sofa at home. Sure, it's a different mindset when you're down low compared to where I am up here at about 400 feet. When you're down low, it's total concentration of a very different type, but it's still very relaxing. You're one with the machine, you're feeling the air, you're listening to that motor, you're dialing it in, very, very small increments of power, just working it to stay right at the edge so that you're saving as much gas as you can to go as far as you can. It kind of reminds me of the book that I read when I was in college called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. This is Zen and the Art of Sky Surfing. Well, that long-winded soliloquy on the Sky Surfer ethos has brought us to the threshold of Severy. An interesting facet of this particular sky safari was that Severy has no airport. I cover this in much more detail on my Flite Blog, which you can find on the internet, but suffice to say, after considerable research, I found a rancher in Severy named Rick Batson, who said it would be okay if I landed in one of his hay fields. A mowed hay field is about as good as you can get as a landing field for a light airplane. On top of that, Rick's field is on the edge of town. The flight to Severy was short compared to most of my safaris, so as I approached town I had plenty of fuel remaining. I decided to take considerably more aerial photos of the town than I normally would do. So I'm going to shorten this segment up and bring us to the landing phase of the trip. As I approached Rick Batson's hayfield, I saw a flatbed pickup with a headache rack approaching on a side road. Since Rick said he would be busy working that morning, I decided this must be his daughter Amber and her husband Justin. The landing was uneventful, the field was perfect, and as you would expect, I'd had to document the event with some more pictures. That being accomplished, I finally put the camera down. By the time I landed at the Batson hayfield, it was pretty windy. As Providence would have it, this field was like it was made just for me. At the southwest corner of the field was a perfect large stand of trees that would make an excellent windbreak. I decided to head over there and park. This stand of trees provided such a good break from the wind that for the first time that I can remember, I didn't even tie the plane down. It was that calm behind these trees. After stepping out on planet Earth again, I strode over to meet Justin, Amber, and young Brock Baumgartel. After a while, Rick Batson showed up too. I hope you liked the flight to Severy, Kansas as much as I did. This is Brian FitzGerald, the Sky Surfer, wishing you blue skies and tailwinds. See you next time.